our response in the US to really look a lot like tuberculosis, taking a real public health strategy to treating HIV more aggressively and preventing HIV more aggressively. Now, in the past, those were siloed into different strategies, but now they're squarely focused on biomedical intervention. So everything at its core has an HIV medicine or a combination of HIV medicines necessary to achieve our public health goals. We know that in the US, and I think we've heard a lot about this in this conference already, that there's a movement that undetectable is equal to untransmittable. We are moving toward earlier, more immediate therapy, and lots of programs that are blind to insurance and payer to start antiretrovirals on the day of diagnosis to take advantage of their benefit for both treatment and prevention. We've launched pre-exposure prophylaxis programs that are really fueling historic declines in HIV, with 1 year a decline in infections in MSM by 15%. So both are strategies that rely on antiretrovirals, and both of them are limited by the great expense that we put out for our antiretroviral medications in the city. So literally, the way that I think of it from the public health perspective is that drug costs are breaking our back. Quite literally, our resources are getting overly focused on purchasing medicines and are less focused on program. So we're having problems reaching our priority populations because we're spending the money on the drugs that we need to actually achieve the end biological goal of preventing and treating HIV. This also threatens our longitudinal linkage to care, because as this becomes more and more complex, adherence becomes more difficult, as well as linkage to providers, given the fact that HIV programs are met with some really significant resource limitations. Now, so leaving the universe of public health, the next question is, are providers and patients ready for generics in the US? And this one, I think, is a really important conversation and debate. So HIV care in the United States has always been looked at as extraordinarily personalized medicine. In the age of multiple well-tolerated regimens, providers have appropriately advocated for freedom in prescribing without formulary limits. But that means unfettered use of medications that could potentially, again, break the bank, while there are alternatives that could achieve the same or similar goal. Not only do we have sort of work against providers' thoughts on this, but we also are a market that is inundated by big pharma. We are always taught in the United States that newer is always better, even if it's only marginally better, or even if at best it's not inferior. So the way that we're really looking at this is that we are getting bombarded by folks who are telling us, you must use the newest drug. Patients are bombarded by ads in the media. In my practice, and when I see my patients, every time something new comes out, the next question is, should I switch to this? And if I say no, I have a very long debate about why that is not necessary. Providers are also bombarded by what's called unbranded CME, which supports really the idea of some of the marginal benefits of the newer agents. So I'm also unaware of any study, at least in the United States market, demonstrating what patient or provider willingness is to work with generics or low-cost alternatives. I imagine that that's a very important area to pursue, since I can't really answer that question. When, however, I ask providers if they would keep someone on such an agent versus newer agents, most cite benefits about newer drugs, whether they're in studies or whether these are marginally detectable. For instance, TAP is a lot better than TDF for bone and kidneys. It's marginal, if at all important. That single tablet regimens are better than multiple tablet regimens. That's up to debate. So there's a lot of sort of issues that have entered the sort of thought process of a medical provider doing HIV care in the United States that are based more on secular trends and less particularly on the data. So it really does trigger some mistrust of going on to generic or other low-cost alternatives. This is further supported by the fact that our guidelines in the United States really aren't very explicit about our ability to use these agents. So when you look at the guidelines, and I think the guidelines committees in the United States are fabulous. This is in no way any sort of, well, I think it's a challenge to them, but I'm not really saying that they're not doing their job. They're doing a fabulous job. It's just that every time there's something new, it goes to the top of guidelines, and generic and low-cost alternatives so far are just a footnote. And so American providers really try to focus on guidelines for the most part, so there needs to be some movement in the guidelines to include the option of low-cost alternative formulations or generics. And then additionally, in a universe where we have a very dysfunctional healthcare system in the United States, payers are very confusing, the way insurance works is very confusing, and ultimately there's no financial benefit to medical organizations or providers to use generics over these costlier agents. So I think unless we have a change from that perspective, I don't think we're going to see a lot of traction in the market. And then finally, the way that the United States system is built around HIV care is potentially even threatened by generics and low-cost alternatives. And this is something that we have to sort of talk about straight out, which is that really discounts for these drugs support the work that HIV programs do in the United States. Not only HIV programs, but other federally qualified health centers, other places that use pricing to be able to float a lot of their other work. And the idea of a lower cost agent is appealing, but the first thing that has to happen is that we have to repair the system that isn't funding HIV appropriately in our jurisdiction. Until that's done, then we're really going to have a lot of friction between lower cost medicines and the benefits we get, the hidden benefits that we get from pricier medication options.
Thanks so much for being so frank. I just wanted to ask you about the sustainability of programs such as yours, where you'd really like to make sure that you've got at least 90%, if not more, of people at risk on PrEP, and extending it further out of New York to New York State, and lessons learned from the regulars, other parts of the country doing that, with these, especially for PrEP, with the cost of PrEP as it is at the moment. Do you see any backlash in the future saying that this is just the payers going, this is just costing too much for any benefit we might be getting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the good news is that that we have results, just like London has results. I feel like since we're able to demonstrate that with the rollout of pre-exposure prophylaxis, we've significantly decreased new diagnoses in our jurisdiction, and it really goes along with the time frame. I think we're safe for now. But in the long term, you know, as our incremental benefit from doing this over time may change, I think we're going to have a very different conversation. And I think that really all of the programming that focuses on rolling out biomedical interventions, I mean, I also think of our immediate antiretroviral start program. It's called Jumpstart. Jumpstart is so expensive, and it's not expensive because of the providers. It's not expensive because of the care. It's expensive because we're committed from the public health perspective to provide people with their first 30 days of antiretroviral therapy for free if they can't afford to pay it. And we're blind to their insurance if there are delays that happen because of prior authorizations or other things that will delay initiation. So unless we get some sort of giant vote of support from the pharmaceutical industry that says, we're going to help you with this initiation of medicine because we know that people will stay on these medicines long term after you meet them, we are literally looking at our budget being destroyed by antiretroviral costs.
Tim, over to you now.
Terrific. First, I think we're going to start with a slide.
And this is one for them to memorize.
Yes, there will be a test at the end. Okay. I have put this up here to educate, to enlighten, and I suppose in some respects to entertain. What I present with you here is the U.S. drug pricing system. And believe it or not, this is actually the easy version of the U.S. drug pricing system. Just to walk you through this really briefly, if you take a look at sort of like at the middle of the slide, essentially with the private sector prices. So this is essentially what's happening with a lot of the commercial payers. And what happens in that space tends to dictate what's happening on either side of that, which is On the left side, you'll see what happens on the state level, particularly around our Medicaid programs, and on the right side is what happens with a lot of our federal purchasers. Well, when we think about it, I think that one thing that's really important to remember is that we have private payers, we have public payers, we have state payers, we have federal payers, and this is it. And the thing about this, and if this wasn't complicated enough, so much of this is absolutely shrouded in secrecy. And what you see here before you is just really just a very large system of discounts and rebates and concessions, so on and so forth. So truth be told, when we see the list price, those aren't the prices that are paid in the US. But in knowing what the prices actually are paid by these different payers is pretty much anyone's guess, unless you're some of the select few who actually do have access to these data. So again, a lot of this is really shrouded in secrecy. Now, the thing about HIV care delivery in the United States is it's really unique. It's very, very unique in the United States in that we have a patchwork of national programs that really ensure people living with HIV have access to the care and treatment that they need. I will note it's very different for prevention, in which we do not have that patchwork. So, in turn, the high cost of prescription drugs are rarely felt by patients. And that is, in fact, a very good thing. However, in making the argument for lower cost treatment in the absence of demand from patients and providers is extremely difficult. Another challenge that we face is the potential cost savings associated with the introduction of lower price prescription drugs are not felt equally across the different U.S. healthcare payer systems that we see here. In fact, and this is where things start to get confusing, newer, lower cost products can be considerably more expensive for some purchasers and payers, Medicaid programs, for example, given the way these rebate schemes are set up in the U.S. healthcare system. There's also considerable pushback against formulary management of antiretrovirals in the United States. For example, unencumbered access to TAF-inclusive regimens and to single tablet regimens that are commercially available. This strongly weakens the ability of payers to negotiate lower prices for HIV drug products. So I think some of the big sort of questions that we're now considering in the U.S. is this sort of builds upon Dimitri's point, does every single person who's diagnosed with HIV, particularly if they're young, they have normal bone function, they have normal renal function, does that person need to be started on TAF? You know, is TDF an option that can be considered? Does every single person living with HIV need to be started on a single tablet regimen? Again, there is a demand there, but when you start to take a look at like what the science actually says around single tablet regimen versus even once daily multi-tablet regimen, the science really isn't there. So I think that's something that's really important for us to consider. Additionally, many HIV programs and care programs that exist in federally qualified health centers, as well as the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, which is essentially our care of last resort, and that's what actually makes our patchwork complete, are heavily dependent, at least in part, on discounted purchasing through what is known as the 340B drug pricing program. I won't bore you with the details there. In short, and this is the way this works, the longer a drug or co-formulation is on the market, and the more the price actually increases out of lockstep with rates of inflation, the bigger the penalties are, and the bigger the discounts become. And so, I think that sort of feeds into the issue around different payers and different purchasers paying greatly differentiated prices there. And so that is a real consideration for us. But here's the thing, I mean, we're just not seeing the robust federal and state dollars being invested in prevention and care. And I think this very much builds upon Dimitri's point. Unless we can get the federal government to ensure that we have all of our services fully funded, then this is the problem is this is the system in which we are now operating. This is the system in which we must now base a lot of this. So unless we're willing to set fire to this system that has been on the side, unless we're willing to do that, then this is the system within which we must now operate. So therefore, things get very complicated on that particular level. So, so the patchwork of purchases and payers that exist to ensure affordable access to HIV care is the closest we have come to universal health care in the United States. For the most part, HIV care is affordable and treatment readily available to people living with HIV. But the U.S. healthcare system is now in a state of flux. And we still have a lot of people living with HIV who aren't in care and aren't biologically suppressed. We need to do better to find out resources. And we are seeing examples of increasing resistance among public and private payers to cover the cost of the increasingly expensive therapies. Just this week, we saw the launch of a single tablet regimen that debuted at $41,000 a year. And this is the situation, this is what we're up against here. So I think that's a very important consideration here. So, and here we have the responsibility to not only provide pressure on payers, but to begin in earnest bringing both the prices and payer costs down in systems that is now stretched to the brink. So it remains very important for us to continue thinking about reducing the high cost of HIV care, the ways in which we can make cost savings that work with people living with HIV and vulnerable to HIV, and of course the societal benefits of reducing spending and prescription drugs. And this sort of circles back to Anton's point: how can we ensure that the cost savings that we're talking about here are in fact reinvested back into the system, to your point, that we are actually seeing societal benefit, but that people living with HIV and those who are vulnerable to HIV do not suffer.
Thank you very much indeed. Although it's complicated, you've made some very interesting points about the catch-22 of pricing and service provision. And I mean, you know, in many countries in the world, we're trying to make sure that they're not dependent on, even when drugs are given freely or they're given at very discounted prices to support healthcare systems. Who do you think, and maybe you're going to say it's everybody, who do you think the group should be that really could push a change for this? Is this just the vote, or is it going to be activism? Or is it going to be people who are already politicians who wake up to the fact that the system, maybe, as you said, might need to be torn up and burned?
Well, I think for me, a part of it is end up having to be awareness. And I think that because one of the biggest challenges that we have is that the issue of access has been so conflated with price that I just don't think it's a part of our routine dialogue. So I think that in the U.S. in particular, I think we need to sort of like wake up with a cold hard reality that HIV care is very expensive and that HIV treatment is egregiously expensive. And so I think just increasing that awareness and understanding how that the price can in fact jeopardize and is jeopardizing our ability to access care and to access prevention. I think we need to have that awareness, and through that lens is the opportunities for us to think about what can we actually do. And the thing is, it's just not one lever to pull. I think it's going to happen on the payer level, it's going to happen on the manufacturer level, and I think it's also going to be about providers and people who are living with HIV and vulnerable to HIV infection to really having a frank dialogue about cost and pricing.
And just to finish, I know this is we're in a very strange political world, but do you think we're going to have traction, Dimitri, on Capitol Hill to try? Because, rolling back the Affordable Care Act, with these sorts of arguments, well, we used to, remember, there was a lot of activism where people looked at and went, yes, we've got to do something. So maybe both you can have a very quick comment about that. Dimitri, then Tim.
So I think that I'm going to just be a realist and say I don't think there's going to be a lot of movement on this on Capitol Hill. I think that, however, it is an area that requires enlightenment by experts like Tim and also other advocates. I just don't think that people really know, and that especially politicians on the Hill don't really know, that there is really a trade-off between care and drug pricing, and that trade-off is real. And as the drug prices continue to grow, and as we need to get these newer agents, newer regimens that may or may not have any benefit out to everybody, the people who suffer are the poor as their programs get dismantled by potentially the current administration. People in middle income who are covered by insurances that will eventually hit a point where they won't cover this medicine anymore or have high copays. So the only people who are really immune are folks who are extraordinarily rich, who can afford copays or have insurance that's good enough to cover them without any sort of deductible or other sort of payment problem. So I think that it's just as you can see, such a complex issue in a universe where we communicate with tweets. This is a really hard tweet.
Tim, final quick comments.
Just to build upon that, is that the one thing I'll say about HIV care in the United States is it really is it is the closest that we come to universal health care. It's the closest that we come. And the lessons that we can learn from HIV in virtually all diseases in the U.S. or even in primary care and preventive care, the lessons are great there. I will say this, though. Under the current administration and Congress, we've actually just seen one of the most ambitious drug pricing proposals to come out from the White House. It's ambitious, and I wish it came out from a different White House administration, but it came out of this one. It's ambitious. It's actually really quite smart. However, it is also incredibly problematic and disingenuous, in which it blames drug pricing on this. It does not blame it on where it actually starts, and that's with the manufacturers.
Okay, thank you very much. A round of applause to both of you.